presente, aunque es un evento que siempre abrimos para también dar cabida a otros alumnos de últimos grados, etcétera, y profesores. Y bueno, pues nos visita hoy Robertico Croes, que es catedrático en Economía Aplicada al Turismo en la Universidad de Central Florida, ¿no? Es uno de los investigadores pues, más reconocidos internacionalmente en algunos temas que nos interesan mucho, como la competitividad de los destinos, el turismo en islas, porque él procede originariamente de la isla de Aruba. Y bueno, y también hace un trabajo muy importante sobre el turismo y la calidad de vida particularmente de la población local, ese vínculo, si el desarrollo turístico promueve la calidad de vida de la población local o no, cómo medirla, porque todo eso nos enfrenta, estamos hablando en clase con los mercados turísticos, la medición, al final medir número de turistas que llegan, lo que gastan y demás, tiene su complejidad, pero relativamente sencillo. Medir cómo está evolucionando la calidad de vida, el bienestar de la población local, incluye aspectos objetivos, subjetivos y muy complejos, pero realmente es la pregunta más importante que podemos hacernos, porque al final todo esto del turismo es para que la gente viva mejor. Si no vamos a vivir mejor, intentamos buscar otra alternativa, ¿no? Y bueno, pues les dejo, repito que es un privilegio para todos ustedes tener aquí hoy, para todos nosotros, a Robertico y contándonos pues un poco todas sus investigaciones sobre la temática. Gracias, Robertico.
Gracias, Robert. Buenos días. Good afternoon again. My name is Robertico Croes. I'm from the Rosen College of Hospitality Management, one of the 12 colleges of the University of Central Florida. University is located in Orlando, and Orlando is the U.S. capital in terms of hospitality and tourism. Pre-pandemic, the city, the metropolitan area, received over 75 million tourists. And so it's a huge endeavor and industry in that particular area. It is also the location of the Disney World, and it's actually the theme park capital of the world. There are multiple theme parks there, and that was really the beginning of the industry some 50 years ago. Actually, this year, Disney is celebrating its 50th anniversary in Orlando when it moved. And our university actually is a space grant university. We are relatively young, a little bit over 60 years old. We were established in order to support a space program. We are only 30 minutes away from the Kennedy Space Center, and we are not a traditional public university in terms of supporting agriculture as most public universities when they were established just right after the beginning of the American independence, which was in the beginning of the 19th century when they established what we call the land grant universities, public universities, in order to support agricultural support. So the U.S. is a relatively young country. You know, it's not like Spain, you know, hundreds of years. U.S. is only 200 and something years old. And so therefore, universities do not have the same, you know, heritage or roots as universities in Spain have. But still, they are very unique in terms of their structure, how they focus, and how they promote research, and how they work with students in that respect. So today what I wanted to do with you, and please, if I'm boring, just shut out, you know, just tell me you're boring, you know, talk some sense to us. So don't be too timid and modest about that. What I want to do today is kind of give you a sense of how we approach master students in our situation back then in Orlando, and the focus on problem solving. So our system, we consist of 3 different levels of higher education. We start with the undergraduate education, which is basically the bachelor's degrees. We have the master, and then we have the PhD. Our bachelor degree is very much focused on getting a job. So therefore, it is focused on competencies, skills, and critical thinking, and more in light of, you know, leadership requirements that you need in order to get a job very quickly, if that is your purpose. The second one is the master level, where you're already in the industry. Usually you're in the industry working, and what that is one of our requirements that we have, that before you step from the undergraduate to the graduate level, and the first level, which is the master student, that you need to have industry experience before you can be admitted in our program. So which means that most of our students, they come in with some good, you know, understanding of what the industry is all about. And remember, what we are doing is we are doing management. That is our focus. So it is the scope is very narrowly defined in terms of we are trying to assist management in terms of creating business models that can help those companies make more money, you know, as management school. So we are not that much into society, which is more tourism. That's why the two words, you have hospitality, you have tourism. And hospitality is just one component of the whole tourism industry. It is the business aspect of tourism. And it includes, you know, accommodation, restaurants, theme parks, transportation, cruise business, and so on. So that's our focus, okay? My research is more, and when I teach, I try to provide more a macro view, more the forest instead of the trees approach to any problem. So our master program is very much focused on problem solving at a higher level, okay? So my first question to you is, imagine if, you know, you got a call from the Prime Minister of Spain, and because knows that you have great professors here, and Laguna is a great university, and there is an issue because of the volcano in Las Palmas, and ask you the question, how can you come up with some creative ideas and some ideas how to really put the island back very, very quickly on the recovery path? And it can be on several levels, not necessarily on the whole island. But imagine that Rio calls you and says, you know, we are about to invest in a new hotel and build a new hotel in Las Palmas. Does it make sense to do that? You know, so that's a problem. That's a real problem. Or you're managing, or there is a hotel there. Rio has a hotel. Do you think we should pull out of that particular market right now? It's not. And as you know, in hotels, you have different legal structures, how you get involved with a hotel. You can have equity, so you put the money in, you build the hotel, you own the hotel. You can have it through franchising, they use your name, you know, which is the brand and everything, you bring in your management, or they can have a management contract with you, where it's has nothing to do with franchising. You can have whatever name you have on top of the hotel, but it is the management crew from, you know, that particular group will come in and manage the hotel. So they can say, you know, if I'm a management company, does it make sense for me to stay right now based on what's going on? So these are hypothetical questions that, you know, one can think about that could happen at some point when a situation is in a very extreme situation with a crisis like a volcano, a hurricane, a terrorist attack, you know, or a virus for that matter. So there are several things. Nature and man-made disasters can cause, you know, several things. So here I was in a real situation back then in 1986. So when I'm saying that, of course, I'm dating myself in terms of my age. But I was in a similar situation then, with not in terms of a natural disaster, but it was about because of the complete shock of the oil industry in by the mid-90s. I'm coming from this island. It's a teeny tiny island. You have to think about Las Palmas, the same, about a little bit bigger than Las Palmas.
La Palma.
La Palma, I'm sorry. La Palma. My apology for that. La Palma. And it has about the same, in 86, the same amount, of people living there, inhabitants. Goes 70,000, I think. La Palma has about 80,000 or something. So about the same. And the problem was very simple. The oil industry shut down with everything, right? And it took away all these numbers, a drop in your GDP output, unemployment, people leaving the island. And so what are you going to do? What are you going to do in that particular situation? And these are, real things that can happen to an island, a small island, because a small island in a way is, you don't know where things will be coming from left field at some point, but you know that it will happen. It will happen either because of natural disaster, it will happen because of climate change, it will happen because of a crazy person, shooting people, killing people, whatever. So, but at some point it will happen, and you have to be prepared for that. So, what are you going to do? During those days, in that case, remember, it was for 80 years an oil industry economy with the engineers. So there was no sense of service. And remember, the business that we are in is a different type of product. We are dealing with intangible, perishable products. We are not dealing with tangible products. We're not dealing with a table or a chair or a car. So it's a different mindset. So these are the mindset of engineers. And usually engineers have a different way of approaching problems. So to switch, to navigate that problem of the mindset and move everybody to a service economy in a very quick way in order to mitigate against social pain, it's a daunting, task and a daunting challenge to deal with. So at that time, the only thing available very, very quickly was just 7 miles of wide beaches. Just 7 miles, that's it. Nothing else. So the decision was the only way to do it very quickly, it is through tourism. And I will explain later why that was the case, why tourism and what is the main problem, research problem, or main policy problem that small islands confront. Okay? And then on top of it, the Prime Minister of Spain sent you a bunch of people from the IMF, World Bank to try to assist you and to talk about the problem. And in those days, it happened as well. So what happened then is the World Bank was saying, it is impossible. You guys have been so many years in oil. Just forget about it. You don't have the mindset. You don't have the attitude. You don't know what tourism is. Just it will be a waste of resources. It's a waste of time. We put as very simple, at that time, Aruba had 2,000 rooms. We just wanted to double the amount of rooms, 4,000 rooms. Politically, it was a decision because people can understand, grasp the meaning, and people can help monitor the process. So if I'm saying, 4,000 is the number, it's very easily to understand, from a societal perspective. And there is also part of the challenge, how to bring everybody together in order to go in one direction in a time of crisis, because during a time of crisis, you have a lot of fragmenting forces that can really jeopardize, your whole movement. People can be against it, because remember, 40% unemployed, people are upset. People are frustrated. People are desperate. So it's not easy to come up with something with a clear message that people can say, I understand what it means. I understand how to do it and how to monitor that and how to put social pressure in order to do it. And basically, the reason why everybody was so doubtful about that whole concept, and the message of 4,000 is because people thought that there was no comparative advantage. And remember, in everything that you do, you're finishing school right now and you go into the market, one of the first things you have to think about is, okay, why should somebody hire me? What is it that I'm so distinct, unique in terms for that company to hire me in my job? And it could be very simple things. It could be how I present myself. Do I present myself professionally? And that can reflect in the way I'm dressed. It could be reflected in how I present my resume. You know, that's also very important. It could be in my demeanor. It could be in how I speak, in how I communicate, how I connect. So there are several things that you have to think, you know, yourself. What are my fortes in order to, you know, make a difference in my conversation? Because I know that I'm not the only one, you know, searching for this or looking out for this job. There are more people looking out for this job. So what should be unique? So that type of uniqueness, the technical word for that is comparative advantage, right? And that is how companies look at others. They look what is their uniqueness. Destination look at other destinations. What is their uniqueness in order to offer? So if you have to sell something, how would you sell Tenerife? You know, I'm in the States. You come and visit us at Orlando, and you tell me come to Tenerife. I can go anywhere in the world. Why should I come to Tenerife? So you should have, you know, a sales pitch, what we call, in order to say, okay, you come to Tenerife because we are happy people. There's no happier people than us in the world. So that is, you know, one way how you can sell something. And that is part of the conceptualization of comparative advantage. You know, how do I get to that? So let's look at some numbers just to see if I fast forward. And these are the numbers in 2018. So when Aruba started in 1986, it was, I mean, with the drop of the GDP, the unemployment, you know, from $10,000, more or less, or $9,000, just close to 5,000. And the GDP per capita is one, Professor Raul was talking about measurement. That is one way how you measure a situation in a quick way, like price. You know, if you go to a shop, you look for a sneaker, and you're looking for some sneaker which is fashionable, quality, you can brag a little bit about, and if the sneaker is $20, you will say, maybe it's not. But if it's $80, yeah, that's a true Nike. So that is something that I will buy because it gives you a signal about quality, about fashion, about status, right? So it's the same thing. So a GDP per capita is a kind of a signal about where you are as a place, as a destination, an island, or a country. So back then in '86, about $5,000. So with tourism, that teeny tiny island increased to 31,000, and PPP, which is basically when you compare to other, you normalized. I don't know whether it's too technical, but you normalized so we can compare it with other countries. So, for example, it's the same basket of food. If it's $5 here, it's the same $5 in the state to buy the same amount. So you normalize it. That's more or less what we call the PPP. So if you translate the GDP per capita in 2018, we're talking about $42,000, which is a huge amount on average per person. 1 square mile of that island, of the 90 square miles, produces 400 million per square mile. Do you think about Tenerife, how much it produces per square mile? This is another way of looking at things, right? So what is it? What can produce that amount of money? Is it agriculture? Is it cheese? Is it cheese, smoked cheese like Hierro, for example? Is it the wine? Is it tourism? Is it oil? Whatever. But it is very important to engage in that type of thinking in what you do, and you monetize, you put a number to it because it's a simple way to see whether it makes sense or not in terms of the resources, your time, what you value, etc. And of course, you need to know what is your ultimate objective in what you're doing. And we're coming to that particular point. And productivity, is also a way to look at things. So the total factor productivity close to 1, which is not that bad. It's a very serious and respectful number. But is life only about money. I have $42,000 on average. I can do whatever I want. I can buy my car. I can buy the house. I can be the owner of the house. I can visit Tenerife. I can enroll at the University of Laguna. I can do the things that I want, right, with that money. But does it make me a happy person? Does it make me a person who is satisfied with my life? And why is that important? Why should I care that much? Why should I, think, why are you happy? That's a very important question, in things that we do. We need to find a final objective, not only as an individual, but as a group of individuals that we can convince each other, this final objective in all our efforts when we come together collectively, that this makes sense. Okay? Well, it happens that this question has been part of the conversation for more than 2,000 years. From Aristotle, Plato, all these people, kind of ponder about these questions. What is it? What is happiness? What is it that makes people happy and satisfied with life? And, how can I see happiness? How can I, measure that part? Over time, over 2,000 years, there has been an involvement in the thinking about that. And there is only one country that I can think of that has in its constitution that the pursuit of happiness is the final goal of the collective efforts, and that's the United States. After the American Revolution, they included that in their constitution. And I'm not aware of any other country that has a similar strong statement in terms of why they're doing things collectively. Okay, so there are countries that are saying what we are doing, but they are not expliciting why they are doing such a thing collectively. What is the purpose of what they're doing? We can say, what? We are the country who plays soccer. We are world champions. And you can put it in your constitution, Soccer is our national sports. And there are countries that have something,
like that.
But there is a why. The why is missing. Okay? And that's why in the States, whenever they say something, there is no discussion about why they are organized the way they're organized, but always they say, in the how. And the how, this is democracy in progress. It's never complete. It's never perfect. But it is not about the final objective of the social arrangements. It is about how we are doing. So our experiment is not perfect. It is in progress. Okay. So over time, also that concept of quality of life has evolved as an experiment for human beings, and it depends on, of course, how we progress as human beings. At the beginning, it was, especially after the First World War, it was heavily an instrumental focus approach about how we will measure and consider quality of life. So what it means is people very quickly will look at the money. How much money do I have? Is that money sufficient? How much possessions do I have? How much calories I take per day? And some of them came up with the number 2,000 calories I need as a human being for physiologically that I can have the good life, a healthy life, etc. So that's the instrumental approach. However, at some point, people start saying, especially in the 70s and so on, saying, wait a minute, but why is it that Professor Ruhl has more than me? That's not fair. That's not fair. I'm working very hard. Why don't I have a house? Why don't I have an intake of 2,000 calories per day as he has? So the whole issue about equity and equality became very, very important. And then you had a basic needs approach, which is basically they came to a conclusion, the countries in the world, scholars say, This is the minimum that a person should have in order to be considered as a human being and have a decent life. Okay? But most of these two, most of the discussion about these two was about resources, was about possessions. It was not about what can those resources do for you. So I can, for example, I can tell you, okay, I have 10 bottles of water, but it doesn't say anything of what I can do with that water. Does it make me a better person? Does it make me do things with it? So the conversion about resources to something that I care about, that was missing in the literature. And it's like thinking about, you have input. What is an input? There's a process, and there's an output of that water. So that part of process and that part of output was missing in the whole conversation about these two. There was this guy, Nobel Prize winner, Amartya Sen, said, wait a minute, that's very, very important. We need to know what resources do, what water can do for me. That's very crucial, critical. Because otherwise, why would I need to have water? I need to live healthy. Okay? So he came with a thing, with very simple, I mean, I'm translating here as a complicated way. He is talking about three things. You need to have opportunities in life. They call them, in this technical word, capabilities. Then you need to have the freedom in order to really decide on those opportunities. And then you need to have the resources for those to achieve those opportunities, which he calls at the end functionings. But basically it goes into what can I do with the resources that I have to achieve the things that I value in life. Okay? So that's basically his thought process. But he said it is the freedom. And remember, maybe in Spanish history, you can be more familiar with that. But back then, at the end of the Middle Ages, there was this whole discussion about, who is a person a subject, yes or no? How can I, move away from God and from the state, that I'm a person and I have certain rights because I'm a person. It's me, everything is me, right? There was a whole discussion about that. And so what these two were saying is about resources. Sen is saying capability approach is saying, you know what? It is a lot about I. And so therefore, I need to have the freedom to decide. Nobody else can decide for me. I decide what is valuable in my life. If I want to be a Messi, I will become a Messi. If I want to be a Rolando, I will be Rolando. Okay? So that was the discussion. But it became a little bit confusing because what are the things? We need to come up with a list of things in order to have some standards to compare people. Okay? And these standards should be across cultures. And so, but Sen was very much against it. And there were some other scholars like Nussbaum that came with a list of 10 really important capabilities that you would need. You need to be healthy. You need to be educated. You need to be included in your family, your surroundings, etc., etc. But then there was a group saying, wait a minute, I can have all that. I can have the money. I can be educated. I can be healthy. But still, I feel that I'm not happy. So you're telling me about all these things outside of myself, but what about my inside? So it's about me, but all these things, the money is coming from the inside. I'm not spitting money. I cannot spit money. So the money is coming from the inside. The food is coming from the outside. I'm sorry. The food is coming from the outside. So what about my inside, my feelings, my perceptions of things? And they're saying, you know what? My feelings could be very different than my the objectivity outside, out there. And we found those things. We found indeed there is a difference about how people perceive the outside reality compared to how they feel about that. And we did several field work in for example, in Latin America, and this is beyond islands actually. And what we found was that most of the time you ask a poor person, are you a happy person? Or are you satisfied with your life? Usually they will tell you, yes, I'm very happy. But if you look physically at how they live, the living conditions, you will say, this is impossible for a person to be happy. The house is not really a house, doesn't have a real job. You see it, the clothes, you see it, what they eat, it is impossible. So there is this dichotomy between how I feel and that particular reality. And every year there is this Gallup poll that issued happiness results, and you find these funny situations where people in Paraguay is happier than people in Sweden or in the United States. I mean, Paraguay is, after Bolivia, it's the poorest country in South America. Or Paraguay, the people of Paraguay is happier than the people in Chile. And I know that the people in Chile objectively does much better than the people in Paraguay. But still, that is how they feel. And you have to be careful with that, because at some point it can really have perverse consequences in terms of how you perceive it. You go to La Palma, you ask people, are you happy because of the volcano? They'll tell you yes, because that's their attitude about life. But you look at their conditions right now, they lost their, how do you call that? Their wine, their how do you call it in Spanish? Cosecha or something like that. So they lost everything, but still they say, I'm happy. And so it can distort your view of how to solve that problem. Because you could say, if you're happy, you're satisfied with your life, why should I come up with solutions to the problem, right? So that's why it's also very important, to look at both sides and to balance that. So here are just some things that in the case of Aruba, it was not only about money, that's part of the question, that's very, very important, but it's also about this quality of life, which is also manifested in another concept called human development. So they do the Human Development Index, HDI, which is a United Nations measurement about how well you are in terms of human development. It consists of 3 items: income, health, and education. They have universal health care. This is about the environment, and so on. So it's a combination of the triple bottom line, which is kind of embedded in the sustainability framework. So I'm just sharing this as an example about that part. And here I come to the issue about why tourism in this particular case. The small island has a very specific problem. And the problem is, as it's already indicated, it's small. And when you're small, you have an issue of scale, right? So, for example, if you are in a business, if you cannot sell 100 croquettes Iberico per day, you cannot cover your cost. That's your scale, actually. So you have to sell more than that. So an economy is the same thing. If you don't have enough demand, certain things you cannot do. It costs too much to have it, right? For example, I can think about Hierro having a desalination water plant. I mean, you will not be able to pay it with the 8,000 perhaps population. So there are certain things because of the size you cannot do. I'm working right now with a small island in the Caribbean, Saba. Saba is the smallest Dutch Caribbean island in the Dutch kingdom. It has only 2,000 2,000 inhabitants. You guys go to the cinema? Do you visit cinema to watch movies?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah? You have cinemas here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you imagine a place like Ceiba doesn't have a cinema because the scale doesn't allow it, doesn't permit it? If you're thinking in terms of business. I mean, of course, if I have money, like I'm Jeff Bezos, and I go there, I don't care about that objective of profit business, right? But they cannot have that. And there are so many other things that they cannot have because of scale. So what does tourism do for you in those situations? Tourism bring in the scale for you, because bring in a demand, enlarges the demand of the island, which allows you to do more things. And it depends how many tourists you want or how many tourists you're capable of servicing. But these are people, transient people, coming only for 7 days, 9 days, 2 weeks perhaps, with good disposable income and spending money in your economy, which allows you to, for example, have a cinema for the inhabitants to, go and watch the movie. Right now, each one individually has to have a laptop or something like that and look at Netflix. So scalability is a very important concept when you're dealing with size. And it's not only size in terms of a destination, but also size in terms of a business. What is the optimal size that I need in order to be viable? And that's a very important question when you kind of frame the solution. For example, when I ask you to imagine about the situation in La Palma. So what is that amount? How do I get to that? And there I have worked a lot on tourism specialization, which is basically, bringing in these tourists, let them spend the money, and that becoming my most important activity, because it brings me that demand that I need, that scale that I need. But again, it's not only, it's a process, it's not a one-time event, but it is a process of longer time, and actually with a lot of commitment and innovation to really pull new market one time each time. So, for example, segments are not durable. I mean, for example, you're receiving the German segments right now, but at some point you may decide, you know what, the German market is not the market that I need because they're not spending the amount of money that I would like to have. So I'll move to another segment. I may move to the French segment, So remember what I said at the beginning, 1 square mile, $400 million. That is, the type of mindset you need to have in terms of when you approach a problem or, of a destination or of a business in that respect. So most of the time, and I have seen that multiple times, that when people think in terms of small islands, they think in a negative way. They think in terms of, how do I do things to reduce vulnerability? How do I do things in terms of to protect those resources? And my experience and my research has said, you have to put that mindset upside down. You need to think about opportunities. How can you think about a solution in terms of opportunities instead of, negative, stopping this, stopping that, in order to protect the people? And the reason for that is not only if you think about opportunities, you can become more creative, and you can, and remember, creativity is not that you're a genius. Creativity is a collective process. Okay, it doesn't depend only by you. You could be the tipping point, but it's everybody together, because ideas doesn't just appear, in the sky. It is things that already exist, and you reassemble those, you reconfigure those things in order to be creative. But if you think about opportunity, it is about how can I reconfigure things to make things better, to create more opportunities, more types of jobs, better types of jobs for the people, and enhance quality of life. And that's very, very different in terms of how you think about things. For example, if quality of life is not about natural, for example, natural resource constraints on development by imposing limits. If you look at the read articles, it is, you know, those resources that we have, don't use them. Just leave them as is, because otherwise we will waste them, and it will affect our lifestyle or affect our quality of life. I'm saying we should use them to enhance quality of life. And of course, quality of life is also about the environment, but the way we should look at it, it is about how these resources can help me to have a healthier life, a happier life. And it could be that we decide as a healthier life that, for example, the CO2 emissions is bad, which it is. Those emissions are bad. So how are we going to resolve that? But it is not by limiting opportunities. It's not by blocking the use of resources, right? But it is by doing smarter things with those resources. And some resources maybe is no longer viable because they are not smart. They are not really making us progress toward healthy body, being safe, having a warm friendship, an educated mind, a good job.
Sometimes could be leave those resources as they are. I mean, sometimes it could be really instrumental to have a very protective view of the resources you have. What you're stressing is that you need to measure the opportunity cost sometimes, no?
Well, it's not only opportunity cost, it is about what that protection will do for my quality of life, right? Because that quality of life is my ultimate goal, right? If I protect that, and for example, I can protect the one whole island, but what does it do for the inhabitants? I know, for example, in some cases that we did, another island in the Caribbean, and I use the word parakeet because these people came from the environmental protection, and the parakeets were kind of an endangered species. So they said we need to protect this parakeet. But what happened with the farmers? The farmers were producing corn, and corn, you have this. The sweet corn has this thing like a crown on top of it. In my language, I call it tapushi. And what happened at some point is that the parakeets started eating those corns and kind of devastating the existence of these farmers. The same thing with the fishermen. You protect the fish, that's nice, and it's important, but then you don't provide alternative to the fishermen. So what will happen to their life conditions? And that is what I'm saying in terms of protection without creating opportunities. That is what I meant with it. And that happens a lot because these NGOs are very powerful, and most of the time farmers, and when you work with poor farmers, these poor farmers, they don't have the power to resist those new laws, regulations that come out from the outside. That they are not in the situation and the context of the farmers, and that they know what will happen. So it's not again against the protection, but if you decide to protect a bird or a fish, then you need to provide alternative for those who were depending on those things, right? And that is very, very crucial. How? And you can do, what are the alternatives? You can retrain them. You know, you can move them to other part. That's part, because they're part of the society as well. So to come up to my final almost my final slide here, one or two. You have actually, these are the goals. You know, if you translate, let's say you're doing a problem, usually you're doing a problem, you have research questions, right? And remember, we said that the big problem is the pursuit of happiness. It is enshrined in the Constitution. So how do I translate that into questions or propositions, because we need to find out whether these cases, whether it's true or not. So these are the two, and then it boils down, can we achieve those two goals, those two objectives in a small environment, in a small constrained island, And so if we can tourism help you achieve that? Okay, so you're kind of building your case here in order to help, again, this situation in La Palma. So here are usually the challenges of open economies, volatility, vulnerability, and the level of resilience that you have. We did many studies about these questions, and we have a lot of publications here. And here are some numbers, how small islands have really performed during time. So you can see here the OECD. Spain is a member of the OECD. So during this time, that was the real GDP growth in percentages. Look at a small tourism specialized island with over 20% specialization. Here is less than 20% specialization. So see their growth rate during that time. So it tells you something that tourism, can help you. So we're trying to answer the question here by looking at comparing what we're doing. Remember what we said, in order to reach that, 1 mile, $400 million, what can help me reach that goal? Is it tourism? Is it farming? Is it wine? Is it fishery? Is it oil? What have you? Okay, to reach that. And the upside is, we have a lot of cases that we have seen that kind of reflect this, these remarks here. It produced growth. It has produced relatively more equal societies with high human development and so on. But there are some, and what is important is human capital. It's not so much the investment, but human capital. So you need to invest a lot in education. So, for example, the role of Universidad La Laguna would be very instrumental in that respect, focusing on, human capital. What we learn is, for example, investment that it dissipates very, very quickly. You have a jolt in growth, but then over a year, max 2, basically it disappears completely. While human capital has a larger impact in terms of binding these two, tourism and economic growth. But here are some downsides that I will show you. So this is a bunch of items together. See how the link between change in GDP per capita and the tourism percentage. But over time, what did we see? We see that relationship has a diminishing return. So what does it mean? It is that each percentage that I increase in specialization over time will have less power than at the beginning. So that is a problem, because at some point maybe I will not grow anymore. And there is a lot of discussion in the literature why that could be the case. And the other thing is that we look at is also we're looking at economic growth and the Human Development Index, how it grows. And we see, again, the same type of pattern. So there are diminishing returns, there are thresholds that we need to look at very, very quick, very, very carefully. So that's part of the downside. But then there is another downside about what we learn. And that has to do with feelings. It has to do with how do I perceive myself as a person. And as you grow in terms of wealth of an island induced by tourism, we have noticed there is a lot of social comparison. What does it mean? It means that I have a car and you don't have a car. See, why is it that he has a car and I don't have a car? What's wrong with me? I'm the same as him. So why can't I have a car? Or why can't I have this particular car? So what's becoming more and more visible in our research is that status, social status, is becoming very, very important. So you start comparing with each other, you know, whether I have the most fashionable dress or brands, the most expensive brands, or I have the most luxurious cars, or I have traveled the most. So it's a lot about consumption and not so more about productivity. And that mindset can be very dangerous for small, and of course for big countries as well. But because big countries have more opportunities than small countries, it poses a very great challenge to whoever have to decide, and you and your future job will decide as well in terms of the workers or employees that you have to control, right? Because if your employees are not thinking about productivity and they're thinking about, well, you know what, I don't think I can work 8 hours per day, you know, because I have to go to this party, I have to go to that party because my friends are going, I have to go to this soccer game, Tenerife is doing great, maybe going to La Liga, so I have to be, you know, in that crowd because that's the fashionable crowd. So status becoming more and more important, it will erode the whole concept and attitude of productivity. And in order for us to remain at the level or, you know, keep improving our lifestyle, whatever lifestyle we decide, we need to have a very strong opportunity to use resources that are good for my health, that are good for my social, and when I'm talking about resources, it's not only environmental resources. I'm talking about also social, that I'm not excluded. So I don't want to be excluded from groups. You know, for example, we have noticed among our students that lately in our survey, we noted that there is not this great intensity and passion to excel. If I got a C, bless you. If I got a C, who cares? You know what? I will pass. I don't want to have an A anymore. I don't want to have a 100 because who cares? Because if I have 100, people will look at me that I'm, you know, kind of a freak. You know, I'm different. And I want to be average. I want to be in the middle as everybody else so I can be friendly with everybody. And that has to do with changes in the way how we see how we are doing things as a collective group. And these, bless you, and these are the things that you have to take into account when you decide on how to solve problems.
Excuse me, can you, what about the younger generation? Can you explain a little bit?
Well, the younger generation, because I'm inferring this from what we learned from our students. You know, so this is something, and I've seen in some other, in our surveys from other, especially Generation Y, you know, is less committed to tourism. So it's not that they're coming up with a new idea about a different type of activity, but they're simply kind of receding from the support for tourism compared to their father. Maybe it's complacency, we don't know yet, but we have seen when we compared Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, and the boomers, we clearly see a difference, especially with Gen Y. Gen Z is a little bit too young still in order to get a sense out of it, and in the States you cannot do a lot of systematic surveys with younger people because it goes against the ethical standards. So we don't have a clear sense, but the Gen Y is part of that. And we don't know yet why it is. So we are speculating here, but we know that it is. I mean, it exists. But why? That's part of, you know.
They enjoy traveling.
They enjoy traveling, but they don't enjoy, right, the supply side.
Yeah.
They enjoy the demand side, but they don't enjoy the supply side. Okay? If you have time to read something about management and something about, you know, how to think about problems and risk, what is risk, you know, you should read this book, Michael Lewis, called The Fifth Risk. And the fifth risk is basically the risk that we kind of omitting or shying away of kind of defining it as the existential risk. And the existential risk, a lot of people are saying, is a climate change, but this guy is saying, it is leaders who are not, stepping to the plate in order to take up to the challenge. That's basically the promise. And I kind of use that book in order to trying to, and I'm sharing this for the first time actually, trying to come up with, okay, what would be the existential risk based on our research of small islands? And this is purely speculation here. We have to really kind of expand and delve deeper into it. But it is about social status. It's about the young people who are not that much attracted to the supply side, and the fact that people are not aware that because we are constrained, we have to do more with less people. And that's very important in order to stay competitive. So this is Thomas Macaulay, a very innovative guy in the British economic thinking process. The difficulty that you have when you have to define risk is you have people who are in established, who are already established, and who are very, very difficult to change in terms of the way they think and the way to do new things, because they're accustomed, they're complacent. So this is the way we do things. We have achieved certain level of success, but they don't see that they could have achieved more if they just perhaps change one step or two steps. So they are complacent with 60%, for example, success, instead of being 100% successful. So that is something that you will encounter as well when you go and work in the business. You will get people, because you're the younger generation, you are the younger scientist, and you will encounter those situations. So thank you. That's been the presentation. So if you have any questions, I can answer those questions.
Thank you, really inspiring. Very,
Thank you.
It's a beautiful and delightful or tasteful fruit to the week you have in here.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes beyond everything we have been talking about, and it's very very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question from the sides. So how would you go about La Palma? I'm still waiting for answers. What would you say?
Maybe they can ask in Spanish.
I understand Spanish. My speaking is a little bit underdeveloped, but I think I can handle that. I can manage that.
So actually we should ask maybe the residents in La Palma if they're happy, also about their quality of life, to have a look what actually they would like to have, how we can help them in that way. So don't think about, we cannot think about some solutions without asking them.
Right. I mean, basically what you're saying, that's correct. It's the bottom-up approach. So you start with those who are really, really critical to the situation, right? It's the same thing about the example about the parakeets and the fish, where people, it is important to protect birds and protect animals. But then if you take away the life condition of people, then you have to give them an alternative. Show them a pathway how they can overcome the situation. So, and the only way to do that, if you know what exactly is the context of those people. So ask them questions, go to them, talk to them. If you're in a business, the same thing. A lot of businesses fail because they just think from the top that this is how it should be done. They don't go completely at the level of the employee front line and ask the employees, what's going on? why we're doing this, or why we're failing this, or why we're successful, to learn from them. So the bottom-up approach is very, very important. Thank you for capturing that.
In my case, for me, it's interesting to back again to the difference of the perception of people, clients, for example, in the hotel industry, and the satisfaction. I mean, I think you made a difference. It's not the same the perception and the behavior of people in front of the reality they are living or experiencing, and the satisfaction or the happiness or the well-being they feel, the feelings. So I would like you to explain a little bit better this, because when we usually when I read, or when I write, or when I work with perception, I usually associate it to satisfaction, and I'm making a mistake, I think.
So let me give you an answer of
Yeah.
results of our research, and then I will, because I never did any research in a hotel,
Okay.
So I cannot really say specifically. But for example, I work a lot with poor people. So the way when you look at a group of people, one of the way that you can slice them up in order to look whether, John Doe here is the same as Jane Doe here, you work with quintiles. Okay, so 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and the 100%. So quintile 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So how do we measure, for example, poverty, subjective poverty, how people feel? We just split the group in two, and we define those in quintile 1 and 2. If they say that they are happy, right, or they're not happy, in quintile 1 and 2, we will say they are poor. So they are subjective, what we call subjective poverty. So 60, 80, and 100, they are not, but in those. And then what, for example, we did that in Mexico, and about 13% of the respondents mentioned that they were poor, because we asked them, that question. And then, so 13% were, you could clearly see that they quintile 1 and 2. However, when we look at the objective number of poor in Mexico, there were 39%. Okay? So there is a gap between how people feel about their situation compared to about their objective reality. And so we keep those two in mind in order to make sure that we understand the situation. So here, only 30% say I'm poor, but in reality, there were 39%, 4 out of 10. Here is basically 1 out of 10 say I'm poor. That is how they feel, but objectively 4 out of 10. So you could do the same thing with when you do satisfaction type of surveys with customers or employees in a hotel. And one thing I didn't completely say the truth here, because we did once, and the way we capture and it was very recently about labor shortage. So the way we capture how satisfied are with your work, so we ask you, are you satisfied with your work, yes or no? And then we have a 7 Likert scale, point Likert scale. But then we ask, how often do you think of leaving or considering leaving your job? So if you're telling me, I'm satisfied with my job, but then at the other side you're saying, I'm thinking about 80% of my time of leaving my job, I know that you're not satisfied. Okay? So those are the ways how we kind of look at it. And it's the same thing when a person, a customer saying, I'm satisfied with my experience, but then are you coming back saying, no, I'm not coming back. So there is a kind of inconsistency there in a way that you can really think whether, it's a truthful response or not, or there is a difference. And you try to delve deeper in order to get better insight why there is this inconsistency in terms of what they're saying. Because if you're thinking about 80% of your time of leaving the job or considering, it means that it will affect productivity because there will be a lot of service breakdowns. You can shrink, you are not on time, you can leave things behind, if your housekeeping, instead of you took care of the bed, but then you forgot the broom in the bathroom, whatever. So there is a lot of service breakdown that you need to do more service recovery to the extent that it will increase the production cost for that. So that is something to think about.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm going to try in English, but
That's okay.
my question is about the vacational rent. I mean, in some cities, for example, in Barcelona, there is a problem with the increasing of the pay rent for people who want to live in Barcelona due to the vacational rent, because people prefer to put the flat to vacational rent to rent to other people who want to live there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is a problem because the quality of life, for example, in Barcelona, maybe are lower because of the tourism. How they can resolve this?
Yes, there are some issues with that. The vacation home rentals or short-term rentals can be, confronting problems of people getting cheaper rents to live there, and not only in Barcelona but several places. And it has to do also in terms of the zoning. For example, where I live in Orlando, short-term rentals are not allowed. So simple long-term rentals, nobody can tell me that I cannot rent my house. It's my property. I can decide. The only thing they're saying is you cannot do it short-term, only long-term. So it means that you cannot rent your house or apartment for fewer than 30 days. That's the definition there of short-term rentals. I don't know here, but they use 30 days, 1 month for that matter. So we don't have that problem there because it is completely zoned, and we have areas because vacation homes is a very powerful industry in Orlando as well, but it's completely zoned in certain areas where it doesn't really affect the cost of renting and for people who like to live there, students, whoever, that it is affordable, right? But you have to be careful though, because sometimes I get a sense that there's a lot of blaming on that on vacation homes, but real estate also is a dynamic industry, and there are many other factors that affect the price of real estate. Again, an example of Orlando. Suddenly, for example, where I live, the prices of real estate has increased almost 60% in the past 4 or 5 years. But it has to do because Orlando has become so attractive, so there's a lot of demand, and the construction cannot keep up. So supply cannot keep up with the demand, and which is a different. And maybe, I don't know, Barcelona. I mean, I've been to Barcelona. I don't know the problem there. So what I'm trying to say, we have to be very careful in terms of blaming something, while maybe it is a factor, but it is not the factor, or it's not the only factor to think about it. So in order because of that, we want to get rid of the vacation home industry. It's a very important, because as we grow wealthier as a group, as a collectivity, one of the consequences of that is that we want variety, right? In variety in everything. So even variety, for example, in accommodation, we want that flexibility. Variety is flexibility. I want this, I can have it, right? And accommodation is the same thing. And what we have seen, for example, there is a kind of graduation process where tourists go to a place, a destination, go there 3, 4, become loyal, but then buy timeshare, because it's not easy for someone to buy a property outside of your country. I mean, to come here in Tenerife and buy a piece of property is not easy because I don't know all the laws. There are many uncertainties. So you will do that. You will move to that, situation once you know a little bit. But people are cautious in general. So you start just with a timeshare, and it's a progressive process. And once you have a timeshare, you have it for a few years. And then you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to buy a vacation home because I like Tenerife so much that I want, instead of spending 2 weeks, I want to spend 3 months here. And and people has that money. So, for example, in the States, it's very common that you have two places. You have your first residence and you have your place where you go on vacation. I think here too, you go on the weekend. So it's very common.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Just a minute. In Orlando, you have these spaces of vacational houses by law. I mean, it's a legislation.
Zoning, yes.
Okay.
Zoning it's an executive order that only allows, for example, this type of activity in this particular area, but not here.
Yeah, because here, government tried to make something like this. I don't know if it's working or if not, or we don't know how it's going in reality. I mean, because there's a law, but sometimes it doesn't really work.
In some countries, they are very much. Zoning has a problem because remember, if you are a democratic country and based on the freedom of the people, then you have to keep that balance, because I can say why you as a group are telling me that I cannot do something. I mean, this is my freedom. So, on an abstract level, it is a very complicated problem. It's not an easy problem to do. So you have extremes. For example, if you go to the Netherlands, and the zoning is that it will permit in certain blocks only one, for example, restaurant in certain cities. Or in 2 blocks, only one restaurant of that type. They even, kind of classify the type of activity that you can have in that particular street. So that's the extreme of zoning. But zoning is a very common practice of public policy. So the question is, how do you implement it? So if you implement it seriously, then you will not, for example, confront those issues. And you can do it right in the middle, because zoning, short-term rentals, because you bought the house not for the with the idea of doing short-term rentals, and that's why all these platforms like Airbnb are really trying to take that stain away from their brand, that they're fostering increasing prices, unruly people, kind of creating a lot of noise at night, litters, etc. So they're doing more, and even in the case that some places the owners don't pay room tax, because there are a lot of room tax, and they're not paying that because there's not enough enforcement of that part. So there are multiple issues, and Airbnb is trying to solve these issues because it's bad for its brand. It's not good. Other questions? I have a yes.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I have a little bit of a wrap-up question, no? So, and I want to express it and to see, to have your reflection if I'm going right. In some ways, tourism has been a real source of growth for many countries, for many regions. So growth is very much focused on income on what you get at the end in terms of material well-being. Let's say income, let's say jobs, let's say other government revenues, whatever. Up to this point, that was fine, and for some regions, that would be fine. I don't know, Berlin, Germany, maybe some places in Spain. But for islands, that growth poses some types of paradigm or contradiction or limits to growth. No, so we have people, we have resources, and we cannot grow continually. We cannot have an increasing income all the time because you have limits to growth, and there are limits in terms of resources, in terms of people that can live there, and so on. So now we come up with a paradigm of sustainability. So that in that way, you really have to include a social and an environmental dimension in what you're doing and what for. And islands poses a limit in or a problem of scale in sustainable development. We cannot use the same technologies, we cannot use the same ideas or networks in order to reduce environmental impacts or improve social impacts. So we need to think of sustainability in islands. We need to use tourism on a different way. That's not a source of income anymore, but that's a source of sustainable development. And for that, we need to introduce policies that help citizens or residents to look at tourism as much more than an income source or a source of well-being in terms of sustainability. Is that?
Let me put it this way, and I'll be very frank. I do not really agree with that we cannot continue to grow with income, and I'll explain, why. At the end here, we have to do more with less. So at some point, if you do it smarter, it means that you can change segments, right? And you can change, for example, hotels. Instead of having, let's say, I'm giving here an example of a low-end hotel, which is a Hotel 6 in the States. You pay $60 for that room per night. Maybe you can repurpose that building and make it Ritz-Carlton or Regency or Four Seasons or what have you, right? And so what I'm trying to say, and those money, you need to, in order to think about sustainability, you need to have a lot of money in order to really make these things happen. Yes, and so therefore it is very important to continue to have a flow of money to continue to achieve those things that are important to you. So if you start tweaking those segments and the supply in such a way that you can every time, increase your price, because remember, this is what's going to happen if you remain the same. Okay, it's not a straight line going up. It is diminishing returns. And you have to break that cycle. And the only way to break that cycle is you keep charging more. Next year that I come, instead of paying the price that I pay, I need to pay more. Because otherwise, you guys cannot keep up where you are. And which means that if I cannot pay more, I'm not the person that you would like to have here. You have to look for another segment that can really pay for that amount. The reason for that is there is a concept called the Dutch disease. And it comes from the time of the oil and the gas in the Netherlands. And apparently there's a curse. They use that. And over time, it has really eliminated all the other productive sectors that instead of making the Dutch wealthier, it made them poorer. But in tourism, you have something like that. And the reason for that is because we are the least technological embedded industry compared to other industries. Example, if you have a car industry, at some point, maybe 5 or 6 people can produce 100 cars. Everything is automated. With us, because we provide service, humans are very important in that aspect. So it's very difficult to reduce the cost of humans. Every time you need to have more talent, people with more talents, in order to provide that particular service of the quality that is required and demanded from the tourists. Remember, I'm wealthier. I want to have more variety, but I want to have the service, the top service that I think I deserve. I work hard, so when I go to a place, that is the level of service that I need. And in order to provide that service, which needs to keep up with the level of demand in terms of the quality, you require talented people. And that's not easy. In order to get talented people, you need to pay them more. So that cost and your total cost keep increasing. So if you do not change your paradigm in terms of your price, then you will be out of business very soon, because you cannot keep, your revenues will not be enough with the cost. Okay, so therefore, over time, the price of the destination must increase in order to break this particular cycle, in order to have more money. And there are multiple ways in order how to do it. One thing, for example, in one of the destinations, we noticed that if you look at the RevPAR, and that's another tip, try to be very simple. Try to look at things very simple. Don't make it too complicated. So we discover that if we know the RevPAR of that destination, that will tell us immediately how much money is circulating in that destination during that day. So we don't need to know anything else at that moment, right? So if that is the case, because the tourist visiting that particular destination has a very clear pattern of budget spending. And for that particular tourist, it was about 40-45%. Okay? So if I need at the end how much they spend, I just do a very simple algebra of math, how we call that. You divide it by 45%, and you know how much there is. So we said, well, if you are, for future, in terms of talking about zoning and permitting, if you want to continue to increase the price, every new hotel must have at least this RevPAR in order to continue. Otherwise, you will not make it in the next 5 years. So we brought in a solution in order how to incentivize the hotels to do so. So if you reach that RevPAR, you will take 1 point, you will get 1 point credit for your taxes. If you go 10% up, you will get 2 points. So we use tax credits in order to manage, or at least we suggested, right? No, that was not part of the destination managers. But the whole idea was, if you manage the RevPAR development, you will know how much money, how it will increase. And if you provide the incentive, they will respond to that if it is directly linked. I mean, research has showed us that. So that was one of the situations where, and of course, part of the demand that those type of tourists have has a lot to do with a clean environment, litter environment. You don't want to go and swim at the beach where you have this gray water flushing into the ocean. You will not go to a place like that. So there is a correlation with these things at some point when you reach a certain level, that the demand itself will push you to do these things if you want to remain competitive. So that's very important. But of course, it is not organic. You will feel the pressure. Otherwise, you will see immediately as some other destinations that they lose arrivals. So it means that the government should act with public policy and a number of these things that should happen at some point. So just at the beginning, I have slightly a different opinion, but it
We
ended up,
agree.
it ended up in the
didn't
same.
mean an infinite increase of income as a bad thing to do, but more based on the model. If
Yeah.
you follow the same model,
You're right.
increasing beds and beds and beds
I
in
agree
order
with
to
you.
produce income at the, especially in vulnerable spaces like islands or, places with very valuable resources. Of course, your income will decline at the end because you are killing the chicken, how you say?
But
The
the golden
chicken
egg.
of the golden eggs, no?
Yes.
You kill yourself if you follow that model. And I was stressing more how capital then should help to find income in other model, and also how sustainability can help too. So that would be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just a final thing, I have a gig. We, during the pandemic, we thought very hard about how can we come up with something that can really help the industry. And we came up with an app called Travel Move, which is basically an app that only covers the United States. And it is to help you choose safe destinations. And it is based on real-time information. But it is important not only for domestic travelers, but for example, if you decide to go to the States, you can use this app in order to give you a sense, should I go to Philadelphia, should I go to New York, or Orlando, or where, based on several things. We look at four big items. Health safety, so for example, the COVID. We look at amenities, real-time amenities, and covers everything: hotels, restaurants, theme parks, what you can think of. Then we cover crime, and we cover the weather. So we know that you wouldn't want to go to a place where there's a hurricane, going on, or where there's too much rain all the time, So Seattle, you wouldn't visit during a certain period of time because it's raining every day, the whole day. So it's very important to have the real-time information. What we learned during COVID, there's a lot of places, you go to their website and you look at the place, it doesn't say whether it's open or not, you visit the place, then you are confronted, the place is closed, okay? But this is real-time. If you visit it right now, you make the choice, it exists, and it is like that. And then you can filter. You know what? I want to go to ski. Where should I go to ski? Which mountains in the state should I go and ski? What is the weather pattern? What is the wind and strength? Or I want to go to the beach. Which beaches should I go? You can look at the temperature. I want a place with 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or 82 or 84. So there are several filters that you can check. And then the app allows you as well to book. So you don't have to go to another platform, to Travelocity or what have you. You can book there directly because it has a link, because it's real time. It has a link directly to the business. So we are not an intermediary in terms of the business. It goes directly to them and they take care of that. So you guys can, and the other thing, you log in, it is personal, and you can keep the information, because maybe you're thinking, you know what, after this talk, you guys are suddenly interested in Orlando, you would like to go, in March and during the spring break, and you start looking for information. So it keeps your history. So you log in, you have your own history about it. You can provide reviews of the places, either that you have visited or based on the information. And then we have algorithms in the app that can show you how other people have looked and scored. So for example, again, Orlando, you look at the information and you scored out of 10, you scored a 6. But then you look at the average of all the people who have looked at Orlando is 8. Hey, maybe I've missed something here, or maybe it's a 4. Maybe I've missed something too by overvaluing Orlando. So it's a new thing. It's called Travel Move. you can visit it. This is a scoop. A scoop is, would you say that? There's a primicia,
Oh,
you say?
Yeah.
So we haven't shared, actually we will launch this during the week before Christmas.
All right.
And only at UCF right now, because we are trying to get data in order to whether we should tweak it or not. So you guys can have a look. You can give your opinion, about Travel Move, and see how it works. And so it will only serve two segments: those living in the States who wants to travel domestically, and those living outside who wants to travel to the States. So that's the the scope of the whole app. It doesn't look at Europe, doesn't look at Spain, doesn't look at Australia, and partially the reason for that is most of the places do not have complete information that we needed in order to build the app. Last opportunity for question or comments. I think it's time to close. Otherwise, I'll burden you too much. But that surprised you the most of what I have said. I've seen some incredulous eyes like you. You kind of you don't doubt anything? No? Is there anything that surprised you? Anything that you didn't expect or you expected and was not there?
The Aruba case was very interesting.
Okay.
Fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.